The morning sun hadn't even reached the tall buildings of the city when he woke up. His back ached from sleeping on the cold concrete and his stomach growled with hunger. This was nothing new. It was just another day in a life that most people walked past without a second glance. He gathered his few belongings into an old backpack that had seen better days. A worn blanket, a bottle of water, and something else. Something he kept wrapped carefully in plastic bags to protect it from the rain and dirt. It was the one thing from his old life that he refused to let go of, no matter how hungry he got or how cold the nights became. The streets were starting to fill with people rushing to their jobs. Men in expensive suits talked loudly on their phones about deals and profits. Women in high heels clicked past, clutching coffee cups and leather briefcases. To them, he was invisible. Just another homeless man sitting against a building with a cardboard sign. They'd seen hundreds like him before, but what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly guess, was that this man sitting on the sidewalk had once stood on stages. He had once worn those same expensive suits. He had once been the one rushing to important meetings and making big decisions. Life has a funny way of changing everything in an instant. One day you're on top of the world and the next you're watching it all crumble. For him, it started with a diagnosis. Then came the medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. Then the missed mortgage payments. Then the foreclosure. Then the divorce papers. It was like dominoes falling one after another, until there was nothing left standing. He lost his job because he missed too much work during treatment. He lost his house because he couldn't pay the bills. He lost his family because the stress broke everything apart. And somewhere in all of that losing, he lost himself too. But he never lost his gift. That was the strange thing about talent. It didn't care if you were rich or poor, successful or struggling. It stayed with you like a loyal friend, even when everyone else walked away. On this particular morning, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the sunlight hit the buildings, creating long shadows across the street. Maybe it was the cool breeze that carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the block. Or maybe it was just time for things to change. He found his usual spot near the park entrance where business people cut through on their way to the financial district. The foot traffic was good here, though most people walked past without even looking down. He'd tried holding a sign asking for help. He'd tried asking politely for spare change. Nothing seemed to make a difference. To the world, he was just part of the scenery, forgettable, worthless. But today, he decided to do something different. His fingers trembled as he unwrapped the plastic bags protecting his most precious possession. It had been months since he'd touched it. Maybe longer. He was afraid that using it might damage it, and then he'd have nothing left from his old life. But hunger does strange things to a person. It makes you desperate. It makes you brave. The instrument felt foreign in his hands at first. His fingers were stiff from the cold and from not playing. He positioned it carefully, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Then he began. The first notes came out shaky, uncertain, like he was asking permission from the universe to make music again. But then something happened. His muscle memory kicked in. His fingers found their rhythm, and suddenly the music began to flow. It started soft, almost like a whisper, a gentle melody that danced through the morning air. People walked past, too busy to notice, too important to stop, but the music kept coming, growing stronger with each passing moment. He played a piece he'd written years ago during happier times, back when he had a studio apartment with good lighting and a comfortable chair. Back when he played because he loved it, not because he needed money to eat. The melody carried memories of that life, of the person he used to be. A woman slowed down as she walked past. She didn't stop, but she turned her head slightly, listening. Then she was gone, swept away by the crowd. But it was something. Someone had heard him. He kept playing, losing himself in the music. His eyes remained closed, and for a few precious minutes, he wasn't on a dirty sidewalk. He was somewhere else, somewhere beautiful. The music took him there, lifting him above his circumstances, above his pain. More people began to slow down. A man in an expensive coat paused for a moment before his phone rang, and he rushed off. A couple stopped briefly, exchanged glances, and then kept walking. But they'd heard. They'd actually stopped and listened, even if only for a second. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the street. His fingers moved faster now, confident and sure. The music grew from a whisper to a conversation, then from a conversation to a declaration. He was telling his story without words, sharing his soul with anyone willing to listen. That's when the first coin dropped into his open instrument case. He didn't see who left it. He didn't open his eyes. But he heard the small clink of metal on worn velvet, and something stirred in his chest. Hope, maybe, or just surprise that someone thought his music was worth something. More coins followed. Then a dollar bill, then another. People were stopping now, really stopping. A small crowd began to form, just a handful of people at first. They stood there on the busy sidewalk, briefcases at their sides, creating a small island of stillness in the rushing river of commuters. He opened his eyes briefly and saw them. Saw their faces. Some looked curious. Some looked moved. One woman had tears in her eyes. He closed his eyes again and poured everything he had into the music. All his pain. All his loss. All his hope for something better. The crowd grew larger. 20 people. Then 30, then more. The music echoed off the buildings, filling the street with sound. It was the kind of performance that makes time stop, that makes strangers forget about their meetings and deadlines and just listen. Among the crowd, 3 people stood out. They didn't look like the usual commuters. They wore different kinds of expensive clothes, the kind that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. They stood at the back of the crowd watching intently, leaning close to each other and whispering. One of them pulled out a phone and started recording. Another was nodding his head slightly to the rhythm. The third just stared, her mouth slightly open as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The homeless man didn't notice them. He was lost in his music, in this moment of connection with the world that had forgotten him. His fingers flew across the instrument, creating sounds that seemed impossible for someone in his condition. The music told a story of falling and rising, of loss and hope, of darkness and light. When he finally finished, there was a moment of perfect silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy with meaning. Then the applause started. It wasn't polite golf claps. It was real applause, enthusiastic, appreciative. The sound of people who just witnessed something special. The 3 well-dressed people at the back didn't clap. They just looked at each other with expressions that said everything was about to change. One of them began pushing through the crowd, heading straight toward the homeless man. He had no idea that his life was about to take a turn he never could have imagined. He just sat there overwhelmed, watching people drop money into his case. More money than he'd seen in months. Maybe enough to eat for a week. What he didn't know was that those 3 people at the back weren't ordinary passers-by. And this wasn't just another morning performance that would be forgotten by lunchtime. The tall man in the tailored coat reached him first. He was probably in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of confident posture that comes from years of success. He crouched down, not caring that his expensive pants touched the dirty sidewalk. That alone was unusual. Most people kept their distance. That was extraordinary, the man said, his voice quiet but firm. How long have you been playing? The homeless man looked up, surprised. People rarely spoke to him directly. They either ignored him completely or tossed money without making eye contact. Real conversation was something from his old life before everything fell apart. Most of my life, he answered, his voice rough from not using it much, since I was 7 years old. The silver-haired man nodded slowly, studying him with intense eyes. I'm not talking about playing. I'm talking about playing like that. That level of skill doesn't come from casual practice. Before he could respond, the other 2 people joined them. The woman was younger, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that seemed to calculate everything at once. The third person, another man with thick-rimmed glasses, was still holding up his phone, though he'd stopped recording. We need to talk, the woman said directly, but not here. Are you willing to come with us? Just to a coffee shop down the street. Nothing strange. Just a conversation. Every warning bell in his head went off. You don't survive on the streets by trusting strangers who want to take you somewhere. He'd seen too many bad things happen to people who weren't careful. But something in their faces seemed genuine. And honestly, what did he have to lose? I'll come, he said slowly. But I'm bringing my things. Of course, the silver-haired man said, standing up and offering a hand to help him up. The gesture was so natural, so respectful, that it almost brought tears to his eyes. When was the last time someone had offered him a hand as an equal, not as charity? The coffee shop was one of those upscale places he would have walked past without thinking twice in his old life. Now he felt out of place with his worn clothes and dirty backpack. The barista's expression shifted when she saw him, and he recognized that look. Judgment mixed with discomfort. But the three people with him didn't seem to notice or care. They sat at a corner table away from other customers. The silver-haired man ordered 4 coffees and pastries without asking what anyone wanted. When the food came, the homeless man stared at the croissant on the plate in front of him. Real food, fresh and warm. His hand shook slightly as he picked it up. "Eat," the woman said gently. "We'll talk after." He didn't need to be told twice. The croissant disappeared in minutes, followed by the coffee. It was the best thing he'd tasted in months, maybe years. When he finally looked up, all 3 of them were watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. "I'm going to be direct," the silver-haired man said. "My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is what we do. We run a foundation that supports artists. We fund projects, organize events, and help talented people get the recognition they deserve." The man with glasses leaned forward. "We were on our way to a meeting about funding applications. All morning we've been reviewing portfolios from people with degrees from fancy schools, impressive resumes and professional recordings. None of them, and I mean none of them, had a fraction of the raw talent you just displayed on that sidewalk." The homeless man felt like he was in a dream, or maybe he'd passed out from hunger and was hallucinating. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. "Not anymore. What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled. "We want to help you. But more than that, we want you to help us understand something. How does someone with your level of skill end up on the street? What happened?" The question hit him like a punch to the gut. It was the story he tried not to think about. The story he'd buried under months of survival. But something about these 3 people, about their genuine interest, made him want to tell it. So he did. He told them about his career as a music teacher at a private school, about the students he'd mentored, about the local orchestra where he played on weekends, about the diagnosis that came out of nowhere, the cancer that ate through his savings faster than it ate through his body, the treatments that saved his life but destroyed his finances, the job he lost because he couldn't work during chemotherapy, the wife who left because she couldn't handle the stress, the house that got foreclosed, the slow descent from middle-class stability to absolute poverty. He told them about the nights he'd slept in his car until it got repossessed, about the shelters that were always full, about learning which streets were safest and which dumpsters had the best food, about the shame that burned in his chest every time someone walked past him like he was invisible. "I kept the instrument because it was the only thing they couldn't take," he said, his voice breaking. "Everything else got sold or seized or stolen. But this, I hid it, slept with it under my head, went hungry to keep it safe, because it was the last piece of who I used to be." The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment. The woman had tears in her eyes. The man with glasses was shaking his head slowly. The silver-haired man just looked angry, but not at him. Angry at the system that had failed him. Angry at a world where someone could fall so far so fast. "Here's what's going to happen," the silver-haired man said firmly. "First, we're getting you a hotel room. A real one with a bed and a shower. Then we're getting you some clothes and a proper meal. Tomorrow we're taking you to our studio to record you properly, and then we're going to show the world what we saw today." "I can't accept that," he said automatically. Pride was a funny thing. Even when you had nothing, it was still there making you refuse help. "It's not charity," the woman interrupted. "It's an investment. We think you have something special, something the world needs to hear. We want to produce a video of your performance, put it online, see what happens. If people respond the way we think they will, this could change everything for you." "And what if they don't?" he asked. "What if nobody cares?" The man with glasses smiled. "Then you'll still have a few good meals, a warm bed for a week, and a professional recording of your music." That's not nothing. They were right. It wasn't nothing. It was more than he'd had in years. More than he'd hoped for in even his wildest dreams during those cold nights on the street. "Why me?" he asked. "Why are you doing this?" The silver-haired man leaned back in his chair. "Because 20 years ago I was you. Not homeless, but broke and desperate and one bad month away from losing everything. Someone gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it, when I had nothing to offer but potential. That chance changed my life. Maybe we can do the same for you." The homeless man felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize what it was. Hope. Real, genuine hope that tomorrow might be better than today. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll do it." The woman pulled out her phone and started making calls. The man with glasses was already typing notes. The silver-haired man just smiled and ordered another round of coffee and food. Outside the window, the city continued its busy rhythm. People rushed past, chasing their dreams and deadlines. None of them knew that something special was happening in that coffee shop. None of them could have guessed that the homeless man they'd walked past that morning was about to become someone they'd never forget. But he didn't know that yet either. He just knew that for the first time in years he wasn't invisible anymore. The hotel room felt like another world. He stood in the doorway for a full minute, afraid to step inside. The carpet was clean. The bed had actual sheets. There was a bathroom with a door that locked. Things that normal people took for granted felt like impossible luxuries. "Go ahead," the woman said from behind him. "It's yours for the week. Maybe longer, depending on how things go." He walked in slowly, setting his backpack down carefully on a chair. His hands ran over the bedspread, feeling the softness. When was the last time he'd slept on something that wasn't concrete or cardboard? He couldn't even remember. "The shower works," the silver-haired man said, gesturing toward the bathroom. "Hot water, soap, towels. Everything you need. We'll come back in 2 hours with some clothes. Take your time." After they left, he just stood there in the middle of the room. Part of him was terrified this was some kind of elaborate joke. That he'd step into the shower and when he came out, everything would be gone. His instrument, his backpack, everything. But the bigger part of him was too exhausted to care. He needed this, even if it was temporary. The hot water hit his skin and he actually gasped. It had been so long since he'd felt truly warm. Months of cold showers at public facilities or washing up in gas station bathrooms hadn't prepared him for this. He stood under the stream until the water ran cold, watching years of street dirt spiral down the drain. When he looked in the mirror afterward, he barely recognized himself. Clean skin, clean hair. Without the layers of grime, he could see the person he used to be. Older, thinner, more tired, but still there. Still alive underneath everything that had happened. The knock came exactly 2 hours later. The three of them returned with shopping bags full of clothes. Nothing fancy but new, clean, clothes that actually fit. He changed quickly, and when he looked in the mirror again, he saw someone who could walk into a regular store without being followed by security. Someone who might get a seat on the bus instead of suspicious looks. "Better?" the woman asked when he came out. "Better doesn't even begin to cover it," he said honestly. They took him to dinner at a real restaurant. Not fancy, just a regular place with tables and menus and food that came hot on actual plates. He tried to eat slowly, to not look desperate, but it was hard. His body remembered what it was like to be full, and it wanted that feeling back. "Tomorrow morning we record," the man with glasses said between bites. "We have a studio space downtown. Professional equipment. We'll film you playing, get some good audio. Then we edit it into something people will want to watch." "What do I need to do?" he asked. "Just play like you did this morning," the silver-haired man replied. "That's all. No performance tricks, no acting. Just you and your music." That's what moved people today, that raw, honest talent. That night, lying in the hotel bed, he couldn't sleep. Not because it was uncomfortable. The opposite. It was too comfortable, too quiet, too safe. His body was used to sleeping with one eye open, always alert for danger. Here in this room there was nothing to fear, and somehow that was more unsettling than the street had been. He thought about the morning's performance, about the crowd that had gathered, about the looks on people's faces when they really heard him. For so long he'd been invisible, a problem to ignore, a reminder of how far someone could fall. But for those few minutes he'd been seen, really seen. Not as a homeless man, but as a musician, an artist, a person with something valuable to offer. Morning came too fast. The woman picked him up at 8, bringing coffee and breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs and toast and orange juice. They ate in the hotel lobby while she explained what would happen. "We're going to set up cameras," she said. "Multiple angles. Good lighting. But we want it to feel authentic. So we'll make the space look simple. Just you, your instrument, and the music. No fancy background. No distractions. The story is powerful enough on its own." The studio was in an old building that had been converted into creative workspace. Artists and musicians rented spaces there. As they walked through the halls, he could hear music coming from different rooms. Drums, guitars, voices. It reminded him of who he used to be. Back when he was part of that world, their space was on the 3rd floor. The other 2 men were already there setting up equipment. Lights on stands, cameras on tripods, microphones positioned carefully. It looked professional, intimidating. Don't let the equipment scare you, the man with glasses said, noticing his expression. Once we start recording, just forget it's all there. Play for yourself like you did on the street. They did a sound check first, adjusting levels, testing angles. He played a few scales, getting comfortable with the space. The acoustics were better than the street. The sound resonated beautifully in the room. His instrument sounded the way it was supposed to sound, not fighting against traffic noise and wind. Ready? The silver-haired man asked. He nodded even though his hands were shaking. This felt important, like everything depended on the next few minutes. He positioned his instrument, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Then he began to play. The piece he chose was different from yesterday. This one was darker, more complex. It told the story of his journey from success to survival. The notes started soft and bright, representing the good times. Then they shifted, becoming discordant and painful as he played through the hard parts, the diagnosis, the losses, the fear. But then slowly the melody found hope again. Not the easy brightness of the beginning, but something deeper, something earned through suffering. When he finished, there was silence. He opened his eyes to find all three of them staring at him. The woman had tears streaming down her face. The man with glasses had set down his equipment and was just standing there, stunned. The silver-haired man was nodding slowly, a slight smile on his face. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's the one." That's what people need to hear. They recorded 3 more pieces, each one different, each one telling part of his story without words. By the end, he was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. He'd poured everything he had into that performance. Every bit of pain, every moment of joy, every ounce of hope he'd been holding on to. "Now we edit," the man with glasses said, downloading files from the cameras. "We'll put this together with your story. Keep it simple, keep it honest. Should be ready in a few days." A few days turned into a week. They put him up in the hotel the whole time, making sure he ate, making sure he was okay. They'd check in every day with updates. The video was coming together. It looked good. Really good. Finally, they called him to their office. All 3 of them were there, gathered around a computer screen. The silver-haired man hit play and he watched himself perform. But it wasn't just the performance. They'd added text telling his story. Where he came from. What happened to him. How he ended up on that street corner. And then the music captured perfectly, showing the world what he could do. "What do you think?" the woman asked nervously. "It's honest," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the truth." "Good," she replied. "Because we're posting it tonight. Everything is set up. We have a title, a description, everything people need to know. By tomorrow morning, the world is going to know your story." He felt terrified and excited at the same time. What if nobody watched it? What if people did watch it but didn't care? What if this whole thing was just a beautiful dream that ended with him back on that street corner? But the silver-haired man seemed to read his mind. "Whatever happens," he said firmly, "you're not going back to the street. We've already talked about it. The foundation has a program for artists in transition. You'll have housing support while you get back on your feet. This video is just the beginning, not the whole story." That night they posted the video online, just clicked upload and sent it out into the digital universe. Then they all went to dinner, trying not to think about it too much, trying not to check their phones every 5 minutes. But by the time dessert came, the woman's phone started buzzing. Then the man with glasses. Then the silver-haired man. All of them at once, notifications flooding in. The woman looked at her screen, her eyes going wide. "It's got 10,000 views already," she whispered. "And it's only been up for 2 hours." The homeless man felt his heart start to race. 10,000 people had watched him play. 10,000 people knew his story. It was more than he'd ever imagined. But that was just the beginning. By morning, everything was about to change in ways none of them could have predicted. He woke up to his phone ringing. The foundation had given him a basic phone so they could stay in touch, but nobody ever called him. For a second he thought maybe it was a mistake. Then he saw it was the silver-haired man. "Have you checked the video?" The voice on the other end sounded breathless, excited. "No, I just woke up." "Why, check it. Right now. Then call me back." His hands fumbled with the phone, opening the app. It took a moment to load, and in that moment his heart pounded so hard he could hear it. Then the numbers appeared on the screen, and he had to blink several times to make sure he was reading them correctly. 2 million views. In less than 12 hours. He sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at the screen. 2 million people had watched him play. 2 million people knew his story. The comment section was flooded with messages. Thousands of them. He scrolled through, his vision blurring with tears. This made me cry. Why isn't this man famous? The world needs to hear this. I've been complaining about my problems, but this puts everything in perspective. Someone needs to help this man. But it wasn't just regular people commenting. Verified accounts were showing up too. Musicians he'd admired for years, celebrities, even a few famous conductors and composers, all of them sharing the video, all of them saying the same thing. This was something special. His phone rang again. The silver-haired man, unable to wait for a callback. Did you see it? He asked. I don't understand, was all he could say. How did this happen so fast? Because it's real, the man replied. People are tired of manufactured content. They're tired of auto-tune and filters and fakeness. You gave them something genuine, something that came from the soul, and they're responding to it. By afternoon, the video had 5 million views. News websites were picking up the story. Local TV stations were calling the foundation, asking for interviews. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. The woman showed up at his hotel room with printouts of news articles about him. His face was everywhere. The homeless musician who shocked the internet. The street performer with concert hall talent. The man who lost everything but never lost his gift. This is bigger than we thought it would be, she said, sitting down across from him. We need to talk about what comes next. What do you mean? She pulled out a tablet showing him emails and messages. People want to book you for performances. Real venues, concert halls, private events. There's a talk show that wants you as a guest. A music label reached out asking if you'd be interested in recording an album. This is moving fast. He felt dizzy. Just days ago, he'd been sleeping on concrete, invisible to the world. Now he was sitting in a hotel room while strangers discussed his future like he was already famous. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted. Nobody's ever ready, she said gently. But you have something people want to see. More than that, you have something people need to see. Your story gives hope to everyone who's struggling. Everyone who feels invisible. Everyone who thinks they've lost their chance. The man with glasses arrived an hour later with a laptop full of data. The video was being shared across every platform. It had been translated into different languages. People from dozens of countries were commenting. The metrics were off the charts. There's something else, he said, opening a folder. People have been asking how they can help you. So we set up a fund, just to see what would happen. We thought maybe we'd raise enough to cover your living expenses for a few months. He turned the laptop around, showing a number that made no sense. Over $300,000. In one day. That can't be real, he whispered. It's real, the man with glasses confirmed. People want to support you. They want to be part of your comeback story. Every hour, more money comes in. We verified everything. It's legitimate. The silver-haired man was the last to arrive, and he brought someone with him. An older woman with kind eyes and an elegant way of carrying herself. She introduced herself as the director of a prestigious music academy in the city. I watched your video 3 times, she said, sitting down. Each time I heard something different. Something deeper. You have a gift that can't be taught. It can only be lived, and you've lived enough to make your music mean something. She explained that the academy wanted to offer him a position, not as a student but as an instructor, teaching advanced students, sharing his experience and his technique. It came with a salary, benefits, and housing assistance. A real job. A real life. Why would you do this? He asked, overwhelmed. You don't know me. I know your music, she replied simply, and I know that talent like yours deserves to be shared, not hidden. Besides, our students need to learn from someone who understands that music isn't just about technical perfection. It's about feeling, about truth. You can teach them that. Over the next few weeks, everything moved like a whirlwind. The video hit 20 million views, then 30, then 50. He did interviews, careful and honest in each one. He never pretended to have all the answers. He just told his story and played his music. The first live performance was at a small concert hall. Just 300 seats, but every ticket sold out in minutes. He stood backstage wearing clothes the foundation had bought for him, holding his instrument, terrified. What if he froze? What if people were disappointed? What if the magic only worked on the street? But then he walked out onto that stage, saw the faces in the audience, and remembered why he played in the first place. Not for fame or money, not even for survival, but because music was the language his soul spoke and these people had come to listen. He played for 90 minutes straight, the same pieces from the video, plus others he'd written over the years. The audience sat in complete silence, absorbing every note. When he finished, the applause lasted so long he had to sit down, overwhelmed by the emotion of it all. After the show, people lined up to meet him. Some of them were crying. One man, probably in his 60s, shook his hand and said, "I lost my job 6 months ago. I've been thinking about giving up. Your story reminded me that it's not over until I say it's over." A young woman told him she'd been sleeping in her car while trying to make it as an artist. "Seeing what happened to you gives me hope," she said. "Maybe my break is coming too." That's when he realized something important. This wasn't just about him anymore. His story had become bigger than one person's struggle and redemption. It had become a symbol. Proof that talent and worth don't disappear just because circumstances change. Proof that invisible people matter. Proof that it's never too late for things to turn around. The teaching position at the academy started a month later. Walking into that building, seeing his name on the office door felt surreal. He had students now, young musicians with talent and dreams and their whole lives ahead of them. He taught them technique, but more importantly, he taught them resilience. He taught them that setbacks don't define you. That losing everything doesn't mean you've lost who you are. 6 months after that morning on the sidewalk, he moved into a small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was his. He had a bed, a kitchen, a place to practice. The foundation helped him get established, but the teaching salary meant he could support himself. He was building a life again, one day at a time. The video never really stopped spreading. It would quiet down for a while. Then someone new would discover it and share it, and it would surge again. Each time, new people would reach out. Other homeless musicians. People struggling with medical debt. Anyone who felt like the world had forgotten them. He tried to respond when he could, offering encouragement. Sometimes offering practical help when the foundation could provide it. On the anniversary of that first street performance, the foundation organized a special concert, a big venue this time with over 1,000 seats. All the proceeds went to programs supporting homeless artists and musicians. The silver-haired man, the woman, and the man with glasses sat in the front row, watching as he walked onto the stage. He looked out at the crowd and thought about how far he'd come. A year ago, he'd been invisible. A problem people stepped around. A reminder of how cruel life could be. Now he was here, doing what he loved, helping others, proving that second chances were real. Before he played, he spoke into the microphone, something he rarely did at performances. "A year ago, I was sitting on a sidewalk hoping someone would notice me," he said, his voice steady. 3 people did. They didn't just give me money or food. They gave me something more valuable. They gave me the chance to be seen again, to matter again, to remember that I was more than my circumstances. I'm standing here tonight because they believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. And I'm standing here to tell anyone who's struggling right now, anyone who feels invisible, anyone who thinks it's too late, it's not too late. Your talent is still there. Your worth is still there. You just need one chance, one person to see you. And sometimes you need to be that person for yourself. The applause started before he even began playing, and when he did play, every note carried the weight of that journey. From despair to hope, from invisible to unforgettable, from lost to found. His story didn't have a perfect ending because the story wasn't over. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt, still nights when he remembered sleeping on concrete and wondered if he deserved this new life. But those moments became less frequent, and when they came, he had people around him now, a community, purpose, music that mattered not just to him but to everyone who'd been moved by his journey. The homeless man who shocked the world wasn't homeless anymore. But more importantly, he wasn't invisible. He never would be again. The knock on his apartment door came early on a Tuesday morning. He'd been up for hours already, practicing a new piece he was writing. Creating music again felt like breathing, natural, necessary. He opened the door to find a young man standing there, probably in his early 20s, holding a worn guitar case. "I'm sorry to bother you," the young man said, his voice shaking slightly. "I know you probably get this all the time, but I saw your video, the one from the street, and I needed to meet you." He invited him in, making coffee while the young man explained his situation. He'd been living in his car for 3 months, playing guitar at subway stations, getting moved along by police, eating when he could. The story was painfully familiar. "I'm not as good as you," the young man said. "I know that. But music is all I have. All I know how to do. And watching your video made me think maybe there's still hope. Maybe I won't be invisible forever." They sat and talked for 2 hours. He gave practical advice about safe places to sleep, where to find hot meals, which shelters had the best programs. But more than that, he listened. Really listened. Because he remembered what it felt like when nobody would look him in the eye, when people treated him like a problem instead of a person. Before the young man left, he handed him a card with the foundation's contact information. "Call them," he said. "Tell them I sent you. They help artists who are struggling. They helped me. Maybe they can help you too." After the young man left, he sat at his window watching the street below. That visit changed something in him. Made him realize that his story wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who'd been where he was. Everyone who was still there, still struggling, still invisible. He called the silver-haired man that afternoon with an idea. "What if we did more?" he asked. "What if we went back to the streets, but this time with purpose? Found other musicians, other artists who are homeless. Gave them the same chance you gave me." There was a pause on the other end. "Then, I was hoping you'd say something like that. When can you start?" They called it the Street Voices Project. Every week, he and volunteers from the foundation would walk through different parts of the city. Not with cameras or fanfare. Just walking, listening, looking for talent in the places most people ignored. The first person they found was a woman in her 50s who sang opera outside a grocery store. Her voice was incredible, trained, professional. She'd been a performer once before a divorce, and a series of bad choices led her to the streets. Within 2 weeks, they had her in a studio recording. Within a month, her video had 3 million views. Within 3 months, she was teaching voice lessons and had her own small apartment. Then there was the teenager who painted portraits on cardboard. His art was stunning, raw and emotional. He'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. The foundation connected him with an art school that offered him a full scholarship. Last he heard, the kid was thriving, planning his first gallery show. Each person they helped felt like paying forward the gift he'd been given. But it wasn't always success stories. Some people weren't ready. Some had problems too deep for music or art to solve. Mental illness, addiction, trauma that no amount of kindness could fix quickly. Those were the hard ones, the reminders that not every story had a happy ending, but they kept going. Week after week, street after street, and slowly the project grew. Other cities started reaching out, wanting to know how to create similar programs. Musicians who'd made it big donated money and time. The movement spread. One day he got a call from a television producer. They wanted to make a documentary series following the Street Voices project, showing the reality of homelessness through the lens of art and music, giving voice to people society had stopped listening to. He was hesitant at first. The last thing he wanted was to exploit people's suffering for entertainment. But the producer assured him they'd do it right, respectfully, with dignity, focusing on the humanity of each person, not just their struggles. The filming took 6 months. Camera crews followed him as he walked the streets, captured the moment they discovered new talent, documented the journey of 5 different artists as the foundation helped them rebuild their lives. It was exhausting and emotional and sometimes heartbreaking, but it was also important. The documentary premiered at a film festival and won awards, but more importantly, it changed conversations. People who'd never thought about homelessness started seeing homeless individuals differently, not as statistics or problems, but as people with stories, with talents, with worth. His teaching at the academy evolved too. He started a special program for students from difficult backgrounds, kids who had talent but no money, kids from broken homes or foster care, kids who reminded him of who he might have been if he'd lost everything younger. One of his students was a 15-year-old girl who'd been bouncing between relatives after her parents died. She played piano like someone twice her age, sad, beautiful pieces that made everyone in the room feel something. He worked with her every day after school, not just on technique, but on believing she had a future. On understanding that her circumstances didn't define her limits, she ended up winning a national youth competition, full scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory. At the awards ceremony, she thanked him in her speech. crying as she talked about how he'd saved her life just by seeing her potential when she couldn't see it herself. Those moments made everything worthwhile. Every struggle, every cold night on the streets, every moment of despair, it all meant something because now he could use what he'd learned to help others. But success brought its own challenges. He was busier now than he'd ever been. Interviews, performances, foundation work, teaching. Sometimes he missed the simplicity of just playing music, of those early days when it was just him, his instrument, and the quiet mornings before the city woke up. The woman from the foundation noticed him getting overwhelmed and pulled him aside one afternoon. "You're trying to save everyone," she said gently, "but you can't. You can only do what you can do, and you need to take care of yourself too. Remember, you're still recovering from everything you went through." She was right. He'd been pushing himself too hard, trying to help every person who reached out, trying to prove he deserved this second chance. But running himself into the ground wouldn't help anyone. He started setting boundaries, taking days off, saying no to some opportunities so he could focus on the ones that mattered most, spending time alone with his music just for himself, not performing, not teaching, just playing because he loved it. On one of those quiet evenings, he composed a new piece. It wasn't about struggle or redemption. It was just beautiful, simple and pure, music for the sake of music. When he played it for the silver-haired man, the older man smiled. "That's the sound of someone who's finally at peace," he said. "Hold on to that. Don't lose it chasing the next goal or the next person to save." 2 years after that first street performance, he stood on stage at a major concert hall in another city. A sold-out show. 2,000 people. Before he played, someone from the audience shouted, "We love you!" Others joined in, applause and cheering before he'd played a single note. He stood there overwhelmed, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. The darkness and the light, the despair and the hope, the people who'd saved him and the people he'd been able to help in return. "Thank you," he said into the microphone. "Thank you for seeing me, for hearing me, for reminding me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless, that losing everything doesn't mean you've lost yourself. I played tonight not just for me, but for everyone who's still fighting, still struggling, still hoping that tomorrow might be better. This is for you." The music that followed was his best performance yet, not because of technical perfection, but because of what it represented. Survival, resilience, the unbreakable human spirit that refuses to quit even when everything seems lost. After the show, he met with fans, signed autographs, took pictures. But the interaction that meant the most was with an older homeless man who'd somehow gotten backstage. Security was about to escort him out when he stopped them. "Let him stay," he said. The homeless man looked at him with tears in his eyes. "I saw your video years ago," he said. "I never thought I'd get to tell you this in person, but you gave me hope when I had none. I'm still on the streets, still struggling. But I wake up every morning and think, if he made it, maybe I can too. Maybe I matter too." He pulled out some cash and gave it to the man. But more than that, he gave him time. Talked to him like an equal. Listened to his story. Connected him with the foundation's resources. Did for this stranger what 3 strangers had once done for him. Because that was the real lesson in all of this. Success wasn't about fame or money or recognition. It was about remembering where you came from. About lifting others up the way you were lifted. About making sure your second chance became someone else's first chance. The homeless man who'd once been invisible had become a beacon of hope. Not because he was special or chosen or different, but because he'd refused to let his circumstances destroy his spirit. Because he'd held on to his gift even when he had nothing else. Because when opportunity came, he was ready to receive it. And now he was ready to give it to others. That was the real ending to his story. Not the concerts or the documentary or the teaching position, but the countless small moments where he looked someone in the eye and said, "I see you. You matter. Don't give up." Because sometimes that's all someone needs to hear to keep going. And keeping going is how you survive long enough for your moment to come. 5 years had passed since that first morning on the sidewalk. The musician sat in his office at the academy, looking through applications for the new scholarship program they'd just launched. Each application told a story. Kids from foster care, young adults aging out of the system, talented people who just needed someone to believe in them. His assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's important." A woman walked in, probably in her 30s, carrying a violin case. She looked nervous but determined. Something about her eyes reminded him of himself all those years ago, that mix of hope and desperation that came from having nowhere else to turn. "I know you're busy," she said, sitting down across from his desk, "but I had to come. My daughter saw your video. The one from the street. She's been playing violin since she was 5, and she's incredible. But we lost our house last month. My husband got sick, and the medical bills just kept coming. We're living in our car now." The story hit him like a punch to the chest. Different details, same pattern. Life throwing everything it had at a family until they broke. He'd heard versions of this story hundreds of times now, but it never got easier. "Where's your daughter now?" he asked, in the car. She didn't want to come up. She's embarrassed, ashamed. She thinks being homeless means she's not good enough anymore, that her dreams don't matter because we don't have an address. He stood up immediately. "Let's go get her." They walked to the parking lot together. In an old sedan sat a girl who couldn't have been more than 12 years old. She was staring out the window, her violin case clutched tightly in her lap. When she saw them approaching, she looked terrified. "It's okay," her mother said gently. "This is the man I told you about." "The musician?" The girl rolled down the window but didn't speak. He crouched down to her level, remembering how it felt when the world seemed too big and scary to handle. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Annie," she whispered. "Annie, your mom tells me you play violin. Would you like to see our practice rooms? They have really good acoustics." For the first time, her eyes lit up slightly. She nodded. The academy had practice rooms available all day. He led them to one of the smaller ones with windows that let in natural light. Annie opened her case with careful hands, revealing a violin that had clearly been well loved. Not expensive, but maintained with the kind of care that showed how much it meant to her. "Play whatever you want," he said, settling into a chair. "No pressure. Just music." Annie looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then she positioned the violin and began to play. The first few notes were tentative, uncertain. But as she got comfortable, something magical happened. The music flowed from her like water from a spring. Natural, pure, effortless. She played a piece he recognized, one of the classical standards most young violinists learned. But she played it with feeling that went far beyond her years. Every note carried emotion. Pain and beauty mixed together in a way that made his chest tight. When she finished, there was silence, not because the performance was lacking, but because it was so powerful it demanded a moment of respect. "Annie," he said finally. "That was beautiful, really beautiful." She smiled for the first time since he'd met her, a real smile that transformed her whole face. "Would you like to know a secret?" he asked. Some of the best musicians in history went through hard times. Times when they didn't have homes or enough food, but their music got them through it. And their struggles made their music even more powerful. He told her about his own story, about sleeping on the streets, about keeping his instrument safe when he had nothing else, about how music had saved him and how it could save her too. "The foundation has programs," he explained to her mother. "Housing assistance, music lessons, scholarships. We can help you get back on your feet. But more than that, we can make sure Annie keeps playing, keeps growing as a musician." The mother started crying. Relief, gratitude, and exhaustion all mixed together. "We've been to so many places, asked for so much help. Everyone just sees the homelessness and assumes we're looking for handouts. Nobody sees her talent." "I see it," he said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure other people see it too." Within a week, they had the family set up in temporary housing. Nothing fancy, but safe and clean. Annie started taking lessons with one of the academy's best instructors. The foundation covered everything while her parents got back on their feet. But Annie's story was just beginning. 3 months later, she auditioned for a youth orchestra. Not only did she make it, but she earned first chair. The conductor pulled him aside after her first performance. "Where did you find her?" the conductor asked. "She plays like someone who's lived 3 lifetimes. That kind of emotional depth usually takes decades to develop." "She's been through more than most adults," he replied. "Sometimes hardship creates wisdom that age alone can't teach." Annie's family situation improved steadily. Her father recovered from his illness and found new work. They moved into a small apartment. Not their old life, but a new beginning. And through it all, Annie kept playing, kept growing, kept proving that talent doesn't disappear just because circumstances change. 6 months later, he got a call that changed everything. A major television network wanted to do a special about the Street Voices project. But not just a documentary this time, a live benefit concert featuring musicians they'd helped over the years. "We want to show the world that these aren't just feel-good stories," the producer explained. "These are real artists with real talent, people who deserve to be heard." The concert was scheduled for the Academy's main hall. They invited everyone they'd helped over the past 5 years. The opera singer who now taught voice lessons, the young artist whose paintings hung in galleries, the songwriter who'd gotten a recording contract, the jazz musician who played at clubs downtown, and Annie, 12 years old and nervous but determined to be part of something bigger than herself. Rehearsals were intense but joyful. Watching all these people come together, sharing stories and music reminded him why this work mattered. Each person represented proof that second chances were real, that talent and worth existed in unexpected places. The night of the concert, the hall was packed. Local news crews, music industry professionals, people who'd been following the Street Voices project since the beginning, but also regular folks who just wanted to hear good music and support a good cause. He opened the show, telling the story of that first morning on the sidewalk, how 3 strangers had changed his life by simply seeing him as a person instead of a problem, how that one act of kindness had rippled outward, touching hundreds of other lives. "Tonight isn't about me," he said to the audience. "It's about all of us. About what happens when we choose to see the humanity in each other, when we remember that everyone has a story worth hearing." The performances that followed were incredible. Each musician brought their own style, their own story, their own proof that circumstances don't define potential. The opera singer made people cry. The jazz musician made them dance in their seats. The songwriter made them think about their own struggles and dreams. But the moment that stopped the show was when Annie walked onto the stage. 12 years old, wearing a simple dress, carrying her violin with confidence she'd built over months of hard work and encouragement. She played a piece she'd written herself. A composition that told the story of her family's journey from stability to crisis to hope. It started sad and frightening, with notes that sounded like uncertainty and fear. Then it shifted, becoming stronger, more determined. Finally it soared, full of possibility and promise. The audience sat in complete silence as this young girl poured her heart out through her instrument. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood up, wiping their eyes, amazed that someone so young could create something so powerful. Backstage after the show, Annie was surrounded by people wanting to meet her. Record executives, other musicians, music teachers offering scholarships and opportunities, but she kept looking around until she found him. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me, for helping my family, for showing me that being homeless didn't mean I wasn't worth anything." He knelt down to her level, the same way he had that first day in the parking lot. "You were always worth everything, Annie. I just helped you remember that." The concert raised over $2 million for the Street Voices project. But more than that, it changed conversations. News outlets picked up the story. Other cities reached out wanting to start similar programs. Musicians who'd never thought about homelessness started volunteering their time. The ripple effect kept spreading. Annie's story inspired other young musicians facing hard times. The opera singer started her own program for homeless women with children. The jazz musician began teaching free workshops at shelters. Everyone who'd been helped became someone who helped others. The circle kept growing, touching more lives, creating more hope. 1 year later, he received a letter that made him cry. It was from a music teacher in another state who'd seen the concert broadcast. She'd started looking for talented homeless students in her own city. She'd found a teenage boy living in foster care who played guitar like a professional. With help from local businesses in the school district, they'd created a scholarship program. The boy was now attending a music academy, planning to become a music teacher himself someday, wanting to help other kids the way he'd been helped. "Your story started something here," the teacher wrote. "That boy's life is different because you showed the world that homeless doesn't mean hopeless. Thank you for proving that second chances can become third chances, fourth chances, endless chances for people who need them." He kept that letter on his desk, next to a photo from the benefit concert. In the picture, all the musicians stood together on stage, arms around each other's shoulders. Different ages, different backgrounds, different stories, but all connected by music and second chances and the refusal to give up. Sometimes he still woke up from dreams about sleeping on concrete. Still felt the phantom ache of hunger and cold, but those memories didn't hurt anymore. They reminded him why his work mattered, why every person deserved to be seen and heard and valued, because everyone was just one bad day away from losing everything, and everyone was just one good day away from finding hope again. His job was to be part of those good days whenever he could. The homeless man who'd been invisible had become a force that made others visible, and that he knew was the best possible ending to any story.